So here's a direct follow on, David, and then I'd love maybe just quickly, Andy and Lydia, your response as well. We have a student, Joseph, who's asking, what is the appropriate emotional response to this uncertain future? Should we grieve, hope, remain optimistic?
Yeah, well, I've chosen to remain optimistic because I'm a blind fool. But I would say resilience, and resilience it's important to say that resilience is not having good thoughts, and it's not saying, "Oh, I'm going to be calm." Resilience is about confronting the stress head on and then discovering the coping mechanisms you have against it. And so I think there's you want to turn what seems to be a threat, which arouses like cortisol and all these destructive things. You want to turn that into from a threat into a challenge. And so that attitude, this is the challenge that's going to be part of a narrative where I'm going to be a much better person and we're going to be a much better society. And suffering only hurts you if you can't attach it to a narrative of redemption. And if you can take your moment of suffering and attach it to a narrative of redemption, then those are the moments when suffering helps you.
Lydia, I'd love you to weigh in on this. I mean, you're kind of ground zero in some ways in the U.S. here in New York. And we were joking about this actually even before this call officially started. Sort of what's the right tone and for engaging this topic. What would you say to Joseph's question about grieve, hope, remain optimistic?
Yeah, actually, I would say grief and hope. So the way that I tend to think about this is the sort of kind of pithy way of saying it is plan for the worst, expect the best, hope for the best kind of thing. But I actually really I love the imagery of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he died. And he is there just in total agony and anguish, aware of his upcoming death. And he says, Christ is praying to the Father, to God the Father, and he says, "Take this cup from me." And I think there's a way in which, in difficult situations, we can grieve, we can weep about them, we can certainly mourn the loss to ourselves, the loss to people we love. We can ask for it all to go away. But then Christ couples that with, but not my will, but thine be done. And I think that's really beautiful because, I mean, so for the non-religious person, this might sound like a surrender to fate. For the Christian, this is really a way of saying, like, look, it's not my life, right? It's not my life. At the end of the day, if I believe I am sort of a child of God, or if I believe I am created, or whatever the language you might choose to use, at the end of the day, it's not my life. And so I can ask for all of this to be taken away. But at the end of the day, Christ says, not my will, but thine be done. There's a French Eastern Orthodox theologian whose name I'm blanking on right now. And he says that in times of great suffering, we should not pray, make this go away, but we should ask that which is spiritually most useful would transpire. And I mean, as a doctor who takes care of sickness and suffering, right? Yes, I want it to go away. But at the end of the day, as a person of faith, I think that asking that which is spiritually most useful transpire might be the more honest request.
I have a quick addendum to that, which would just be, I think, a way of holding together grief and hope is something that when we read, especially the Psalms, we call lament. And lament in our language has often become just meaning kind of bewailing something, but the Psalms of lament actually hold together grief and hope almost all the time. There's one exception. There's one Psalm, Psalm 88, that really just ends in despair, because that is part of the experience of human beings at times. But almost all the other Psalms of lament, and it's about a third to, depending on how you count, maybe a third to a half of all the Psalms are in this genre. and they enfold grief in a relationship with a God who is believed to be there. Why bother lamenting if there's no one to hear you? and couple grief with that surrender that you talked about, Lydia, and that openness to what God is doing. And Jesus quotes one when he himself is on the cross, Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's what he says as he's being crucified. It's the first line of the psalm. And in his time, the psalms weren't numbered. You didn't say Psalm 22. You referred to it by its first line. So that's like the name of the psalm. But I would just urge anyone to read Psalm 22, which begins with this experience of total dereliction, utter exposure, and even being laid in the dust of death, it says. But it doesn't stop there. And it's just amazing that we can hold these things together. So faith, especially the faith that comes to us out of the Hebrew Bible and through the mouth and life of Jesus, gives us a way to do these two things together rather than choose one or the other.